Hi, Peter.
Hi.
Thanks so much for taking the time to have a chat with me today. Can we start by my inviting you to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. My name is Peter Cochrane. I currently the Professor of Sentient Systems at the University of Suffolk. I'm also a visiting professor to 3 other universities in the UK. In my past life, I've had my own company for 20 years, and I had an extensive career in British Telecom, and I left in 2000 as Chief Technology Officer. And so I've worked in numerous industries, spanning the Fortune 500 plus governments and the medical industry.
Well, I look forward to hearing more about that during the interview. So, Peter, I've got 4 questions for you, and the first one's this. How have you been looking after yourself during this pandemic, and have you had to adapt to how you've worked in this COVID world?
Well, if we do this in reverse order, my experience is that I'm having to put in 30 to 50% more energy in this COVID world than I did in the real world. And part of this is there's a considerable amount of work required if you start to do everything online. Simple meetings are not a problem, but doing presentations, lectures, and demonstrations to students online take quite a bit of, shall we say, thinking power. I have to create my own animations and demonstrations and things. And so that's been one aspect that's more than kept me busy. And then there's a second phenomena, and I'll illustrate this with a conference in all places in Latvia. I volunteered to help one of my ex-PhD students and just give an introduction to the conference at the front. And I did that. What I hadn't anticipated was that the number of university professors that were in the audience. Originally, the conference would have had something like 200 people in the audience, but because it was online, it turned out to be well over 2,500. And in there were quite a lot of university professors from all over the world. And I suddenly found that one talk developed into 5. And so whilst it was okay, I could repeat them, it took quite a bit of time. So I did these serially, one after the other, to various audiences, including the United States. And that's been a big plus in terms of getting the message out, but increased the workload. So in terms of commercial work, I was working in China. That just stopped dead, you can imagine. And so there's been a relaxation of the commercial work. I've done 1 or 2 things online, but not very much. And so life has been interesting. How do I get any relief, pleasure, that sort of thing? Well, I'm a regular attendee at a local gym. That's been out of bounds. So bluntly, I've spent a small fortune on weights and other bits of equipment. And my entrance hall at the moment is sporting quite an amount of kit. And we have a trainer who comes in twice a week online, and we have 1-hour sessions, and then probably my wife and I will do another session in the week. So there's sort of 3.5 hours of that kind of training. We do quite a lot of cycling. So Suffolk is a wonderful county for cycling, and we're only about 3 miles from the Woodbridge Air Base, and we go off-road mainly. And so the back of the Woodbridge Air Base is an absolutely treasure trove of surprises. And we've got to know that area quite well. We've been down as far as Orford, and most of the routes that we pick are off-road, in the trees, and very quiet, but hard work. It's sand and gravel on a bike is a bit of a killer. But beyond that, we've been doing some gardening. We quite enjoy listening to music. Normally, I would have been fly fishing, but it's not been good weather during the summer for fly fishing. It's been so very, very bright. And the reality is I have to travel to a lake, and that's been off. And so I've just changed my life, DIY, all of those kinds of things. And it's been a full life. So in some respects, I've quite enjoyed this COVID period. And one reason is I've not been down at Heathrow every 10 days flying somewhere in the world. And this is the first time in 40 years where I've had a break from flying about 250,000 air miles a year. And so it's sort of an interesting situation. And I'd made the transition gradually into academia from 2016 onwards. And if you like, this has deepened my desire to spend more time in one place as opposed to charging all over the world.
That's quite some cocktail of impact, isn't it? Both good and challenging in your life.
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks, Peter. That's a lovely way to paint a picture of what's been happening in the last 7 months. My second question is this. So what have been the major tech, organisational and operational challenges?
Okay, well, to put it bluntly, our wonderful government and Donald Trump decided that they would attack Huawei on the basis of some synthesized scare about security, which is very questionable. The net result was my business in China dried up abruptly. I didn't react to that too much. I carried on doing what I'm doing, but I intensified my energies, if you like, that I'm putting into academia. I had a very, very poor education, and I was in a mining area in Nottinghamshire. The system was rather brutal, and they were really conditioning us for a life down a hole in the ground. I went down there and had a look and shook my head. By the age of 11, I got into electronics. By the time I was 14, when they took us down the coal mine, I was well into things like amateur radio and hi-fi and radio control. And so I'd got a job in a TV shop and that kind of thing. And at that point, I started to also go to night school at the age of actually at 16. But right from the radio and TV shop onwards, I had wonderful teachers who I credit with being able to identify my ignorance level and come down to my capability and build on where I was, not where the system expected me to be. And so the gravitas of this, I can only explain in this way, and I don't want to appear to be bragging. I'm not. But as I sit here talking to you, I have 1 O level, 2 really poor A levels, 4 degrees, 2 of which are doctorates, and my first degree was a first class honours. So this says something, if you like, about the failure of education and the power of good teachers and good mentors. And indeed, in industry, when I joined the GPO, which later became the British Post Office, I had one good mentor after another who went out of their way to educate, train, and squeeze out of me the best I could do. And so in my mind, what I am now doing, if you wish, is payback time. I would like to actually impart some of what I've learned and know to the next generation of engineers and scientists, and to actually help them understand. And so you may really like this. I have a mission, and my mission is to change the way we teach and change the way we do research. And so I've gone back to James Clerk Maxwell, Faraday, Hooke, Boyle, and do what they did. They never gave a lecture or a presentation without a physical demonstration. And so my lectures at the university are full of physical demonstrations. They now call it blended learning, and it's kind of a modern view of what we've actually always been doing. It's just that the education system at large has forgotten this, and to just read out of a book or do chalk and talk does not work. Now, I go back to that Chinese proverb, I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, I do and I understand. And so that is my mission. What I do know for sure is I'm definitely in the fourth quarter of the game, but I don't know which quarter of the fourth quarter I'm in. However, I intend doing as much as I can with the time that I've allocated in this life, doing good stuff. And to be frank, I enjoy working with young people. I get quite a bit of pleasure out of teaching, and to see that light bulb go on in their head when I'm trying to get over a complex concept and they suddenly understand is really very gratifying. So basically, I'm having fun.
This is such an unexpected answer to that question, Peter, but then again, you've always surprised me. That's really inspirational, particularly offering us your personal upbringing and how you found education difficult, and partly why, and then of course the fact that you've made your own way, and with the right people around you, you flourished, haven't you?
Yes, I mean, I would put it like this. The education system at last is recognizing things like dyslexia. I'm not dyslexic, but I would say that compared to the rest of the human race, my brain is in my head in the other direction. I don't think like other people. So once you are in an education system that has an expectation that you're going to march to the same tune as everyone else, you're in trouble if you do not think like the average. And as I sometimes say to medics when I'm getting treatment, we're administering medication and medical treatments based on the average. I'm not average. By definition, no one is average. And so individualized medicine and individualized education are the way to go. And we have the technology to do that.
And yes, you're not out of kilter with what head teachers and principals of universities are all saying now about changing the way that young people are expected to build their professional lives on a 3-hour exam, basically, after years of study.
It's ridiculous. I mean, I have to put my hand up and confess, I have never had a plan. I've never had a vision of my future. I have just gone from one interesting opportunity to another. And it's kind of worked out.
Good. And we'll get to the future actually in the last question. But my third question is this, Peter. So how will the world look when this crisis comes to an end? I'm asking you now, I suppose, as a futurist.
Well, I think all my life as a professional, I've been, to some extent, stunningly accurate in predicting when and where the technology will pop up and what it will do and what it will enable. And an incredible failure in predicting what people will actually do. People are the unknown quotient in this equation of the future. But I think we can look at where we are and our own experiences and the world and say, we've actually seen a change that is actually most likely going to change humanity. In the past, I've worked with many people, and one of them was James Locke. He wrote the book Gaia, and just a couple of weeks ago he made a statement, and that was, we have damaged the planet and now she's fighting back. And I rather like that because I think it's very true, it's very visible. We, as a species, are going to have to change the way we live and do things. The recovery from this situation isn't going to be 3 months, 6 months, or a year. It's going to be several years. If we maintain the rather inadequate and poor economic system that we have, we will further destroy the planet. If we try to recover from the economic situation, it will take more than a lifetime. It's bigger than the damage done by World War II. I have this fear that the human race is such a big machine, such a big entity, that the inertia that it suffers in taking action when things are really quite threatening could see us do immense damage. If we do not do something rapidly, we will see a culling of our species, period. And it will come through COVID-27 or some other biological means, a lack of food, parts of the planet becoming uninhabitable because of the climatic conditions, what we call natural disasters, which now a lot of them are tending to be man-made natural disasters. And this will with a fight back, and we'll finish it with a smaller human population. I would not like to see that. As individuals, there's absolutely next to nothing that we can do. Saving bottles, crisp packets or bottles, the solution. The solution comes in the form of Industry 4.0 and Industry 5.0, because what we have to do is create not more and more for the wealthy, not more and more for the few, but sufficient for the many. And if we're going to create sufficient for the many, and it is possible, even with the numbers of people on the planet that we have now, we have to find ways of reducing the energy that we use per unit of production. We have to find ways of recycling. And by the way, there is not a recycling process or system on the planet that works. It's all very nice, but it doesn't actually work. We waste more energy recycling than we do actually recovering the materials. So if you look at the latest moves in industry, it really is about additive manufacturing, printing instead of machining. It's about tagging everything so that we know what it is, where it's been used, how much life, what are the materials in the entity, the component, and then extracting them and recycling that material. So we're now starting to design for a 3R world, as opposed to, oops, we've got all this wastage, now let's try and fix it. We've got to design that in. So in my view, there are no waste materials of any kind. There are only resources that we're not tapping. So to give you one example, one of my PhD students, way back from the 1990s, has been supremely successful, and his latest venture has found a way of extracting the Pepsi and the Coke out of the plastic from plastic soda bottles. Now what actually happens is the Coca-Cola or Pepsi-Cola seeps into the plastic through osmosis and destroys the quality of the plastic. He's able to separate those two. So now we can take old Coke bottles, and what he's actually doing is taking in plastics, and he's become the biggest yarn manufacturer on the planet, the biggest synthetic yarn manufacturer on the planet. And that's pretty wonderful. So I rather like that kind of approach. And you know, people think that, oh, if I throw this plastic bottle away, or I throw this plastic food container away, it's going to break down and that'll become microplastics. Actually, the biggest danger is things like synthetic yarns breaking down. The old clothing breaking down is a much bigger threat. And so I can see actually solutions to all this, where we were able to say, well, I'm going to get rid of some clothing, but that goes back in and gets recycled rather than gets buried. And so that's my vision of the future. Now, the UK has got some of the poorest housing stock in Europe, shoddy built, not very, very efficient from a heat point of view or an insulation point of view. Those kinds of things are fixable. It's not that we've got an energy generation problem, we've got an energy storage problem. And nobody at the moment is investing sufficient. So I'll give you a graphic example. If I took your automobile and I ripped out the petrol tank and I put an electric motor in there, the battery would be 5 times bigger in volume than your petrol tank. That's the rate, roughly speaking, that's the storage density of oil is phenomenal compared to our batteries. So in industry 4 and 5, the secret of batteries is nanotechnology, because it is a surface area to volume problem. And so you can get much more with microstructures. So those are the kinds of things that, if we're going to travel, I have a suspicion that my generation may be the last one to do global travel like it was nothing. We've got electric aircraft. They're short haul, but they work. The big deal is lightweight batteries. But I can see, for example, take your automobile. If I give you an automobile from 20 years from now, it will be using 30% of the materials your car's using. There will be no one involved in making it, because it will be printed and assembled by robots all the way through. And when you have an accident, we will be able to recover all the bits and pieces that are not damaged and repurpose or reuse them. And we'll be able to take the pieces that are damaged and extract the raw materials, because every single piece of it will be smart, it will be chipped. So we'll be able to read that your wheel has done 75,000 miles, it's not really worth recovering, so let's recover the materials and print a new wheel. So those are the kind of tricks that are really going to solve the problem. My worry is, how fast can we get there? My other worry is, we are actually educating people down soda straws, down funnels, if you like, on narrower and narrower topics, when the world is demanding people with a broader and broader education, because you now need to understand, you'll need to understand artificial intelligence, some electronics, computing, materials science, all of those things. So in the last 20 years, I have made my money not by being a specialist consultant, but by being a generalist consultant. So I've worked for people like Facebook, who've got thousands of very specialized youngsters. And I've been able to ride across the top, if you like, and take a more general view and see where problems are in companies and solve problems. And so I'm encouraging youngsters to start thinking about getting a very broad education as opposed to a very narrow one. If you want a narrow education, go take a Google training course or a Microsoft training course. But if you want an education, go to a university.
That's a good way to finish there, Peter, on that question. You've painted a very stark picture, but you've also highlighted the way forward. It's not an impossible task yet. No. Just one follow-up thought was, because I read in the news today that there have been 400 million fewer journeys by rail in the UK during COVID. Do you see that COVID has potentially directed us in the right direction in terms of looking after our environment better?
Yes. I have been doing what we do now for well over 20 years, plus what we shouldn't have been doing for much longer. And so I think it's very humorous that the naysayers and the really big critics of social media have all shut up and started using it. All the people against video conferencing are now using it. And I've been going to conferences for 30 years on video conferencing, telemedicine, teleeducation, telecare, and everything else. And we did it in a week. We did it in a week. The university went from zip to 100% online in a week. I'm not saying it was easy, simple, but we've now got the biggest existence theorem, if you like, for everything that we've ever had. And in that sense, COVID-19 has done us a great favor. The other thing I think to observe is that human behaviors, systems, and nature tend to have cycles. We started with cottage industries, we started with local industries, and we now have the technology coming along that indeed will allow us to do a lot more things locally. So let me give you an example. The manufacturers of tires have realized that the days of pneumatic tires are coming to an end. Solid tires are going to come back, and the actual springing that we get from the pneumatics will be transferred into the structure of the wheel, and that is printed. In fact, we can print a complete wheel, including the tire. We say, well, right now what is happening? Tires that are made in the Far East are put on a ship and they're shipped over, and if you look at the containers full of tires, it's mainly fresh air. If you can reduce those tires to powder, you don't need 20 ships, you need one. Now, if you go down to the local Quick Fit or whatever, tire services, they order the tires from a central depot and they come along. In the future, they're going to print those tires. In fact, they're going to print the entire wheel with a tire on it. And so instead of shipping product, we're going to be shipping software. This is transformative technology. It changes the name of the game. Now, on another level, in the side of food production, we're getting more and more buildings in cities quietly being converted to vertical farms. So instead of farming in fields, they have floors and floors of effectively conveyor belts with plants on there. In the most advanced, there's no soils. The roots of the crop hang down and they're fed from spray.
There's one in Great Blakenham.
Yes, there you go. So growing food 24/7 to order, independent of the weather, with a very short distance between the production plant and the consumer, is a big game changer. So I look at all of these developments and you think, well, this is going to transform cities and towns, and we may see some really sort of shock things happen where perhaps even London, will we bother going there? You know, all the museums are there, but will we be traveling there to work? I don't think so much. The other build will be, there's no doubt about it. I mean, I've always said that the acid test for a video conferencing system is, could a man and woman fall in love on it? You know, one of the things that's missing from this medium is the actual pheromonal connection, the emotional connection, the body language connection. We can do some of the body language with a big screen, higher definition, but there's something quite unique about being with someone. There's more than a visual and a sound and a movement connection. And getting a group of people together, you very definitely get this pheromonal communication. You see it in crowds. Panic is much more, if you like, in a crowd than the sight and the sound. There is a release, chemical release that goes way through the crowd. And so those things are very hard. And so getting together, and I have to put my hand up and say, I've been conducting here for weeks what I call 2-meter coffee sessions. I've had people from here, from industry and from the university, and I've got a conservatory that's, I can open the doors, and we're effectively sat outside, 2 meters or more spaced, having a nice coffee, having a chat, and it's very effective. I always feel that if I know someone really well, I can work with them on this medium, but I've never met them before. It takes a while to establish that trust, that understanding, if you will. And so I think these are some, just a fraction of the things that are going to happen. And a lot of them, there's no going back. I've actually not missed going into London, as an event, or flying to China or the US. What I have missed most of all is being with people. That's my biggest sort of loss, I think. Seeing the people. So I am exploiting the technology to the hilt, as you might expect. I've got in here artificial intelligence in every room. I have, my monitor is 42-inch. I have got a lot of storage. I've got multiple cloud accounts. I have 3 internet feeds to the house. I have Wi-Fi right down the garden, which is 300 meters long. You can sit anywhere and be online. And I've not had much of a division between work and play for many years. That's really gone. I can't separate it. So this morning I wandered down, had breakfast. I was in here about 10 to 8. I start to work. A visitor arrives and we have a chat, and then nothing to do with work. And then I go back into work, and then I have lunch, and then I come and chat with you, and then I've got some other guy arriving, nothing to do with work, and then I'll continue working, and so the days can get long. If you're not careful, you look up and it's 9:30 in the evening, and you think, I think I'd better stop. So there's goodbye 9 to 5, goodbye work and pleasure, or private life and company life, or whatever. It's all become one. I think a lot of people are finding that.
Yeah, that human touch, that human association is the one that impacts on all of us a great deal. In the health world, it's great that I think there's been something like a 70-80% rise in digital offers, where consultants and doctors and nurses and so on are in touch with, or even care workers are in touch with those that they're there to support. But it doesn't take away the fact that you have to intersperse that with face-to-face, because we can't live digitally with this 2D screen.
No, but on the other hand, I would say there's been some phenomenal changes in the health system that are way overdue. Way overdue. I'll give you an example. I happen to be diabetic. It runs in the family. I've been diabetic for a long time. Type 2. I have a medical checkup every year. I have my eyes tested twice a year. And so I go for my blood test, and I'm sat here and I get a phone call, and it's the surgery. Dr. Cochrane, your doctor would like to see you. We've got your blood tests. What are the results? I can't tell you. Why not? GDPR. God damn it, they're my blood tests. Of course you can tell me. But no, I thought, if the doctor wants to see me, this has got to be serious. So she's got a slot. I jump in the car a couple of hours later, race down into Woodbridge to get an interview with the doctor. I walk in the door, and she looks at me and says, yes. And she shuffles around. We've got your blood tests. Everything is okay. What? So I said to her, just a minute. I explained to her what had happened. I've just driven over here. I've spent 20 minutes waiting for you outside for you to tell. Why don't you just email me? GDPR. Give me that piece of paper. I, Peter Cochrane of sound mind and body, do hereby authorize Dr. XYZ to email me my blood results. That was pre-COVID. Now I go in, I have my blood tests and inspection. A week later, the nurse calls me out and says, great news, here are your bloods. She tells me what they are. Everything's okay. How are you achieving all of this? What are you doing? How are you? All this kind of thing. We could have done that 20 years ago. We could have done that 20 years ago. The positive sign, to my mind, on all of the COVID thing is it's destroyed the control freak managers. I need to see you in the office from 9 to 5. That's all gone. They're either out of a job or they've changed. And it's changed people's attitude to providing a service. Now, when I go to the doctors, I don't sit in the waiting room. I arrive before the appointment. I walk in, tell them who I am. I wait for about 2 minutes and I'm in there. It's wonderful. So, full marks to the NHS. They've risen to the challenge and they've changed. And I applaud them for that. But it's always the big machines, and the NHS is the biggest machine in the UK, and their inertia and their momentum have the biggest problem changing. COVID-19's done it for them.
Yeah, it certainly has. Thanks, Peter. Wow, so much to think of. Let's go to the last question in that case. And you've partly touched on some of this, but if you could dig into your vast knowledge of what's going on in the world, and particularly in the UK, maybe even in Suffolk, from your experiences, what learning do you think will come from the outbreak? What do we need to learn from it?
Well, I think people have got to actually realise that they've got to be more self-sufficient. It's absolutely stunning the number of people who have not gone to A&E. We've reached the case where, the situation where people have nothing much worse than a scratch and they go to A&E because it's free or something. Instead of looking, have people totally lost all common sense? Have they lost the ability to look after themselves? And now people are thinking twice about going to A&E. That A&E is no longer overloaded, and the people who do need looking at and the care are getting more time. And I think that's right and proper. So I think there's been a bit of a shake-up, but we are going to be increasingly in a situation that if you don't look after yourself, it's going to be difficult for the system to look after you. And I've had this attitude all my life, but I think those who can will do, and I will do anything not to go to the doctor or A&E. But those who can't are going to have to learn. And so, I've already mentioned that I'm diabetic. We have people out there who are willfully killing themselves by installments because they're either incapable or unwilling to look after themselves. If you get something wrong with you and your body is ailing, it's not up to the world to save you, it's up to you to save yourself. Now that attitude does not prevail. The attitude that prevails out there is, give me a pill for that. I'll continue doing what I'm doing, but just give me a pill for that. Well, unfortunately, there isn't a pill for this. And if you do not moderate your behaviour, you will become ill, you will become a burden to the health system and society in general. And I'm not sure that people really understand that. And I meet young people who are type 1 diabetic, who are running glucose levels that are rampantly out of control, and similar sort of problems, who do not seem to understand that their future's in their hands entirely. I mean, when we're all 18, we can all eat nails and we're going to be immortal, but later on we find out that's not the case. But I think it's a question of education. It's a question of demonstrable damage of what can be done. It's also a question of awareness. So I'm not going to show you, but I have a tremendous number of health devices. And the good news about these devices is they're not expensive. You know, I'll show you my most treasured. Let's have a demo, shall we? I'll show you my. I would do if I could actually open my phone. This is a life changer.
Are you showing me now?
So here it comes. There's my blood glucose for the day and my glucose right now.
You got that through an app?
Yes, it's an app on my mobile phone, but what I've got here is a sensor that glues on my arm, and there's about a I'd say about an 8mm pin that goes into my arm, and it works on the subcutaneous fluids, not the blood. But I can get a reading of my blood all the time. Now, these are actually awarded to type 1 diabetics, but you can actually buy them if you can afford them. And it's a life changer. You don't have to prick your finger. You can, and you can't manage your body without the feedback. And it's no good going to the doctor to get a blood pressure test. Get yourself a tester. It's no good going to the doctor to get your temperature checked. Get a thermometer. You know, this stuff is all a few tens of pounds will save your life. And so I think that we've got to try and transform healthcare. I know that we can do a lot more than we're doing. You know, the definition on these cameras now is such that I could show you a skin condition and you could do a diagnosis remotely, and the treatment could be arranged. So I don't go to a chemist anymore. When I get my prescription, it's all delivered to my home. Now, in the past, I see people traveling to the chemist. They drive to go and pick up their prescription. Why are they doing that? Use the mail system. Save petrol, save pollution, save time. So here's my biggest fear. I would broadly divide society today into two ranks. The time-rich, money-poor, and the money-rich, time-poor. I'm in the time-poor category. We have somehow to empower people to be able to work and do things. The human race, by the way, is desperately short of skilled people. We haven't got enough. China hasn't got enough. America hasn't got enough. No one's got enough skilled people. But we're not creating enough skilled people. And so there's got to be some changes, I think. But I can see the solutions. It's getting there. And one of the biggest impediments of doing that in the UK is a 16th century institution trying to manage a 21st century economy, i.e. Parliament. Unfit for purpose processes that move glacially slow, I think will have to change if we're going to transform society. And that transformation ripples all the way down. Education, healthcare, public services, civil service, industry. The whole thing is going to have to change. In that sense, CV19 has done a power of God. It's forced a lot of change. My biggest fear is 6 months after we got on top of this one, we get another CV of some kind. That's my biggest fear. We will be punch drunk at that point.
Yeah. No, we were on our feet when it hit us first. We were on our knees if it hits us again, definitely.
Yeah.
A conversation I've had elsewhere, Peter. One last thing is that what would the world have reacted? How would the world look like now had the World Health Organization been able to have one consistent way of addressing the COVID situation from the outset? If you took out all the each government intervention,
I think we'd be in a much better place. I think there've been, unfortunately, there have been many voices going in different directions, and motivated by political and financial considerations. Possibly the most extreme is the US, where the voice of one man, one party, one extreme group, with crazy stuff like telling them, we can use bleach or disinfectant or other crazy stuff. I don't know what you do with people when they're in denial, when you can visibly see people dying around you, when you have a family and you worry about their health, and you see people who don't care or choose not to care. It's like the anti-vaxxers or the I'm not going to wear a mask no matter what. The illogicality of that, I don't think we can do a lot about. The message we could get right. I do know for sure, for example, that what to do in the case of a pandemic has been modelled by our government, because I was involved in one team that were modelling it. And so all of this has been thought through, but it's as if it's been forgotten. We're doing this, iterating, and I think the snag is that even those countries that have got it right, who got the most stunning results by nailing it down early, have suddenly gone back to normal. It's all over. No, it isn't, and it's come back with a vengeance, and now they're in bad shape. This stuff takes some discipline. I worry that human societies have not got that discipline to actually do it. If they haven't, people will die unnecessarily. And possibly, for the poor souls that are left behind, there are some of the side effects that are now emerging that look pretty horrendous, not to be fully functional again after you've had this, months after, not knowing whether you'll ever recover, continually tired, physiological, neurological damage, it would appear, that we can't define yet. And you think, my God, that's not a very nice future. So I don't understand. I'm a simple-minded sort of individual. I don't understand people's carelessness or lack of care, and say, well, I'm going to go to a party. I'm not going to change my behaviour. I'm not wearing a mask. I don't understand that, but I think that again is a lack of education.
Yeah, thanks for finishing on that. You started with with talking about the human factor and the human decision-making factor, and we ended on that as well. Peter, thank you very much.
My pleasure.